Welcome to the Let's Get Entrepreneurial podcast, your go-to resource for navigating the world of entrepreneurship. Welcome to another enlightening episode where we delve into the world of serial entrepreneurs, the mavericks who don't just stop at one successful venture, but go on to birth numerous others. Today, we unpack the journey of these relentless innovators, exploring their traits, the thoughts behind their numerous successes, and what sets them apart in the ever-evolving entrepreneurial landscape.
The Let's Get Entrepreneurial podcast is your ultimate launchpad for igniting ideas and skyrocketing your entrepreneurial dreams. Tune in, buckle up, and let's unleash the entrepreneurial spirit within. Your two hosts will be Professor Gary Palin and serial entrepreneur Ryan Budden.
Hello, Professor Palin. How are you?
Doing very well. How are you doing?
I'm doing brilliantly today. We've gotten together to talk about serial entrepreneurs. I'm not sure who listening is going to be familiar with the concept of a serial entrepreneur, but the quick definition of it is it's someone that starts business after business after business. They don't spend their career or their entrepreneurial career focused on building one venture over a long period of time. Does that sound about right?
Definitely. As a matter of fact, it's interesting in our description of the episodes and you and I as hosts, we describe you as a serial entrepreneur.
That's exactly right.
I've never told you this, but I have many people that ask me, what does that mean? And I've had a couple that have said, does that mean he's killed a lot of businesses?
Oh, that's very funny because their context is a serial killer.
Yes.
That's hilarious. I mean, I guess in some fields that would give me credibility, but hopefully I've got a better success rate than killing multiple businesses.
That was actually my thought on why I suggested doing an episode on serial entrepreneurs, because there were a number of people that have asked me, what does that mean?
That's very funny. So you're in the game of starting businesses and then quickly getting on to the next one instead of spending your career building a one company.
That goes to the question that I ask individuals when they say they want to start a business. I ask them, are you trying to create a business or are you trying to create a job for yourself? That is a distinction. If you're trying to create a business, then the potential for serial entrepreneur to succeed with that, the next.
And either sell them or replace yourself, which is the strategy that I like to do.
Definitely. The third option is not a good one. That's to close it down because it failed.
Absolutely. We've done a whole podcast episode on failure. Failing is not always bad as long as you're taking the lessons out of it. And small failures happen all the time. But you're right. You'd like the big successes and failures to be more heavily weighted on that success category.
Definitely. We've talked about different types of entrepreneurs, solo entrepreneurs, lifestyle entrepreneurs, entrepreneurship, corporate entrepreneurs. But this is a different category of serial entrepreneurs.
Right. Probably the most notable serial entrepreneur, so people can look at someone right now, is Elon Musk. He's really focused on many, many businesses, not just a single business at a time. Love him or hate him, he is definitely a serial entrepreneur.
He was one of the co-founders of PayPal, obviously Tesla, SpaceX, and now I want to say his entrepreneurial activities was with Twitter, now X, but he still brings that attitude towards that platform.
Yeah, he did the Boring Company. He did Neuralink. He's doing quite a lot.
Another example that I always think of is Richard Branson. With his Virgin Group, he's been in multitudes of different industry, very often branded under the Virgin Group concept.
An amazing example of failure as well. He has failed so many times with the Virgin brand, yet he is an iconic success with the Virgin brand. Because the times he has succeeded have been absolute home runs.
Very interesting individual.
He's a personality, that's for sure.
As is Elon Musk.
Yeah, exactly. From the definition and those examples, people get what a serial entrepreneur is. But what makes someone a serial entrepreneur? While we were preparing for the podcast, I was thinking about that. A couple things came to mind. Number one, we're literally creating an assessment, the Janus assessment, to be able to monitor what makes someone an entrepreneur. And I think a lot of those indicators are what makes someone capable of becoming a serial entrepreneur, like risk tolerance and resilience. If you're going to be starting businesses over and over and over again, your risk tolerance has to be immense, because each time you're sort of betting the house or betting the success of the previous business on the next business.
Definitely. And the concept of tolerance to ambiguity, your competitive aggressiveness. You're correct. The Janus Entrepreneurial Assessment was based on those tendencies of entrepreneurs.
That's exactly right. The biggest thing that drives or creates a serial entrepreneur, though, is the continuous desire to be doing something new. I know a lot of entrepreneurs that are super successful and still would be entrepreneurs in one business. And they're happy driving that forwards, getting more in depth with their knowledge base. And the serial entrepreneurs want to go as deep into a field as necessary to become somewhat of an expert, but then they're on to the next field. They're not going to spend their life researching and understanding this one small niche.
It's very important to understand yourself, which goes back to the Janus Entrepreneurial Assessment. You have to know where you fit in on entrepreneurship. Both you and I, we are excited about the concept development, developing the structure, the infrastructure, the launch, and the building growth stage. But neither you or I would want to manage a business.
Right. My day job is my consultancy, and I always laugh that I stay on for the technology roadmap design. I'll even stay on through the technology development phase. As soon as it's developed and it's ready to become managed, I'm out. There are people that are better at it than me, have more passion for it than me, and are going to serve that business better than I will.
That's absolutely my point. Is neither is right nor wrong. You just have to understand where you fit in. Because there are people that do not want to get into the early stage as we do. They prefer to step into a company that's still fairly entrepreneurial, but is looking to then move into more of a corporate type of structure where there's longevity theoretically within the business, where you and I would be bored to death.
Right. And you can be a serial entrepreneur in both ways. You don't have to be the one starting the business from idea or from inception to be the entrepreneur. There's a growing trend of people buying these businesses, pumping their knowledge and quite oftentimes financial resources into it to change it into medium or large scale business before they leave. So you can be on that management side, but the concept of bringing your entrepreneurial spirit, entrepreneurial knowledge into that business is what counts.
I have a friend who maintains she's more entrepreneur than entrepreneur. She has been on 5 ventures, 4 of which were wildly successful.
There we go. I'd say she's an entrepreneur.
I would agree, but she does not want to start one.
Sure. Yeah. And she understands that. Again, that's the important thing.
And which is interesting, she's very talented. And those entrepreneurs understand her talent and her abilities. She's highly sought after.
Yeah. She has a track record for people to look at.
Yes. So she's very much entrepreneurial, but not the startup entrepreneur. Going back to overall, you're looking at typical characteristics, is the serial entrepreneurs that I've met are extremely motivated and they tend to be very visionary.
Particularly the motivation level for me stands out. You have to be so motivated, and it's got to be intrinsic. It's got to be inside of you. You can't be relying on someone else or something else to make you get up in the morning and really pursue it. I find it funny because I call myself a serial entrepreneur, so I don't want to sound like I'm just inflating my own ego here. But the serial entrepreneurs I talk to, that's really a commonality between us.
I also find them to have an innovative mindset, and they are also very strategic.
Absolutely. If they've made it past one iteration, hopefully the strategy component has helped.
Resilience and adaptive components to their personalities tend to be more the norm.
Without a doubt.
Now, what about skill sets? What skill sets do serial entrepreneurs need?
That's a big one. The ability to quickly pivot is a big skill set. We just did an episode on market timing. To watch market timing and to be able to adapt very quickly to market trends, what's happening, how they can shift to stay on the cutting edge, beat out competition into fields, keep the business alive is an absolute necessity of a skill set.
What do you think about time management as a skill set?
Well, especially if you're the serial entrepreneur like myself who likes to replace yourself, you inevitably get drawn back into different projects. Being able to manage your time, not only to be able to service those businesses, but also to keep somewhat of a work-life balance is really necessary.
I would describe myself as not a detailed person at all. Because of the importance of time management, I have to force myself to be detailed with my time management, or it becomes chaos.
That's right. Or you end up putting an inch of water in 50 buckets instead of filling one bucket up.
Definitely. Networking abilities is something that I think you want to develop. If you haven't focused on that skill, I would suggest someone focuses very deeply on developing that, because as you have multiple types of activities moving forward, you have to have a very deep network of people in multiple areas.
And you have to be able to draw on that network. So it has to be something that you've kept fresh, or else it's going to be difficult to go back when you're pivoting, when you're changing, when you're having a new business venture or seek an opportunity. You need to be able to draw on those connections quickly and have really fruitful conversations.
Now, how important are negotiation skills in this?
If you're in the entrepreneurship world, negotiation skills, period, are pretty important. You're negotiating with vendors, suppliers, potential employees, current employees, financiers. Life becomes a little bit of a negotiation. You realize that everybody's doing this for a reason. Understanding what that reason is and how to play to those cards is really important. And financial negotiation is not always what I'm talking about.
I agree 100% on that. Networking and negotiation are two critical areas to develop if you're looking to do multiple businesses. How about leadership skills?
Yep. There are different types of leadership skills. And oftentimes the serial entrepreneur doesn't have the classic set of leadership skills that one would think of a successful CEO or a full-time CEO. Leading a small, really fine-tuned team is very different than leading a multi-tiered organization where you need to be the visionary and be good at managing multiple teams with multiple initiatives.
There are three areas also that I very rarely will find someone that has all three. So you want to understand which ones you have and then bring people onto your team to complement you. Those three are business acumen, marketing skills, and then technical skills.
I often find that serial entrepreneurs aren't necessarily solo entrepreneurs. They have a team of people that they rely on to do these businesses quickly and efficiently. If they realize that marketing expertise is not something that they possess, they have a marketing person, a go-to marketing person or team they bring on to supplement their knowledge base.
What are the pros of being a serial entrepreneur?
The pros hopefully are obvious. You have multiple irons in the fire. So you can afford, if the success rate of businesses is as low as people claim it is, you can afford to have multiple irons in the fire. So one of them will be successful. That's from a financial reward proponent. One of the big pros to it is you avoid burnout. You're continuously shifting your focus so that you can get on to the next niche, the next market, the next group of customers that you're going to get to know. And that can be really exciting. If that's your personality type, that can be very exciting.
That diverse experience, I would consider a pro, where some people would consider it a con. The reason I like it is because I'm always pursuing new knowledge, which is something that excites me.
Exactly. I think most people in entrepreneurship, maybe most people in business, every 6 months will look at themselves in the mirror and say, I wish I knew that 6 months ago. With being a serial entrepreneur, you can give up bad habits when you start new businesses. So you have a chance to deploy this new knowledge base over and over and over and over again.
I had a good friend that was working at Procter & Gamble. She was highly successful with P&G. She realized one day she walked into the office and she knew exactly what she was going to be doing in a week, in a month, in a year, and probably 5 years. She knew exactly what she was going to be doing. And many people would think that that's very calming and very stable. She said it scared the hell out of her. She resigned to get into the entrepreneurial world.
And, I would be with her. If I can map out more than a week, I have a rough plan for a month, but if I can map out day to day for more than a week, I'm not pushing myself hard enough.
What are the cons of being a serial entrepreneur?
I'd say the biggest one is probably work-life balance.
Yeah, that's my thought too.
The timing necessary to be a serial entrepreneur is immense. Having a definition for yourself, what work-life balance is and what you want that to look like in your life, to put some guardrails up is really necessary and can be a potential challenge or pitfall.
How about the stress levels?
I find talking about stress to be a very difficult conversation. Stress isn't something that affects my life very much. I do understand, though, that stress management can be a very difficult thing for people. If stress management is difficult for you, it's probably not something you should get into, because what I see stress people out is a daily occurrence for me.
I agree. Would you put a correlation with the fear of failure with the stress component?
Sure. Yeah. If you imagine your worst case scenario and that's something that stresses you out, it's probably not going to be a field you want to go into. I imagine my worst case scenario and think, okay. If that's not the mentality you can take into it, it's going to be a hard field.
I see my students very often get uber stressed over one quiz that might be 5% of their total grade, and they're extremely stressed over it. And I'm thinking, boy, they don't want to be starting multiple businesses.
Right. One fire at a time is easy. When there's a fire in multiple businesses and it becomes 10 fires at a time, you'll really test what your stress level is.
At the beginning of the episode, you mentioned the exit strategies. I know we've done a couple of episodes on exit strategies, but do you mind quickly just running through that for people that haven't heard those episodes? How do you exit this to move to the next business?
So there are probably 3 ways that you can exit to move to the next business to make yourself a serial entrepreneur. The first is through some sort of acquisition. I'll throw a merger in there as well. Something where your control of the business is literally changing to another person or another entity. They're buying it, they're moving you into one of their business divisions, or you're combining with another business that makes you redundant. The second one is to replace yourself. So you still own the business, but you hire an operator or bring a partner on that is operating the business full time. So your time isn't necessary for that business to continue moving forwards. And then the third is failure. It doesn't work anymore. You move on to the next one.
There's one other that I think of as initial public offering.
Sure. If in that instance, you're then somehow moving out of the business, you're using that initial public offering and the money that's raised from it to hire a professional CEO or to change the structure, something like that.
And those are fairly rare. I've never had that as a goal with any business I've been involved with.
To IPO? No, nor have I.
And I've seen many presentations where people looking for investors, they'll pitch the exit strategy as IPO.
For both of us, based on this conversation, the reason that's not attractive to us is you have to be very, 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 very far into the management phase of that business before IPOing is really an option. I will say, typically, you're not IPOing as a startup. In the past, I'd say 5 years, we've seen unicorn businesses that have done that, but that's a pretty unrealistic goal.
Just to clarify, IPO is initial public offering where you're making the sale of the business available to the general public through stock sale.
Yeah, most people are familiar with Robinhood or some sort of trading platform. Essentially, you're getting the business so that it's tradable, so that people can buy and sell shares that aren't early stage investors with you. The last thing I'll say is the life cycle of a serial entrepreneur. So what does it actually look like day to day, week to week, from idea to execution? It can look really different depending on the serial entrepreneur, but the commonality and what makes someone a serial entrepreneur is the fact that it's as soon as possible, they're moving on to the next thing, the next business, the next opportunity. Again, whether that's in the management phase or the start phase.
I always think of before I start any business, I first look at how the exit will look before I even start to see if it's a viable exit path. If it's not a viable exit path for me, then I'm not interested.
Absolutely. What other closing thoughts do you have about serial entrepreneurs?
Understand yourself. You have to understand, do you fit into this definition, into this component of entrepreneurship? If you don't, then absolutely stay away from it. The transition can be very, very stressful to someone that doesn't get a rush from doing this. Whereas if you like the idea of the startup, the development, moving forward, then this is an interesting field to move towards. So you're starting multiple businesses. One area or caveat, I would say, be careful while you're doing this. If you have that personality, don't keep chasing the next pretty butterfly.
Yeah, I like to call that shiny object syndrome. You cannot have shiny object syndrome. And you and I have alluded to that. I can have shiny object syndrome. Because of that, I have a calendar invite for myself for a 2-hour meeting once a month in which I allow myself to have shiny object syndrome. And outside of that 2-hour monthly meeting, I do not allow it to happen. I'll write it in a notebook or a note on my phone, but I am solely focused on what I have going on at the moment, every other day of the week or the month.
I don't know if you remember the famous basketball coach John Wooden from UCLA.
I don't.
In the 60s, I believe 70s, he won a string of NCAA championships. It was absolutely absurd. I forget what the numbers were, but it was in double digits. When he retired, a reporter asked him, Coach Wooden, do you miss all the accolades of the championship? And he said, no. He says, not at all. That was never what got me excited. He said, what I miss are the daily practices with the players. And that's the concept of enjoy the journey, don't get obsessed with the destination. So that would be advice that I would give anyone getting involved with serial entrepreneurship. Enjoy the journey.
Yeah. And I think sometimes that's really hard to do because you get this overwhelming feeling that every minute counts. So you can get a rush towards the end instead of enjoying the day-to-day. Maybe I have to take some of that advice. Well, I think that's a great note to end on. I'd love anyone listening if they could give their feedback. Are they a serial entrepreneur or involved in serial entrepreneurship? What do they think about everything we've said?
That sounds like a game plan.
Let's get entrepreneurial.
Let's get entrepreneurial.
As we wrap up another episode of the Let's Get Entrepreneurial podcast, we extend our gratitude for your presence and attention. Your dedication to the entrepreneurial spirit fuels our passion for creating this podcast. Check out ProfSpirit.com to discover resources and courses designed specifically for innovators like you. Stay on the cutting edge by following us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, and other platforms as it is released. Until then, keep the entrepreneurial flame burning.